Hello and welcome to the Let's Talk Near Death podcast, where we talk about life, death and experiences in between. I'm Kirsty Salisbury, the host of the show, and I trust that the conversations within this podcast will offer value, insight and information into what happens in the afterlife. To find out more about the free online community and extra content, be sure to click subscribe and to check out the links in the notes below. And now, let's get into today's episode.
I had bilateral pneumonia, pretty bad, so they admitted me. And I was there 24 hours in the hospital before they had to do an emergency intubation. So they put me in a coma. It was in the coma where I experienced my near-death experience. And I was so peaceful. I was at so much peace. And I remember saying to myself, you're dead. You died. And I went out and I exited the tunnel into this magnificent, beautiful hall. And off to on my left-hand side, off in the distance, this 3 orbs of light appeared. And I'm standing there and I'm thinking to myself, what is that? What is that? And as we started to get closer, I recognized my deceased father, my mom, and my sister. All 3 have died.
Welcome back to the Let's Talk Near Death podcast. Another exciting episode coming up today. Today, I'm joined by Randy Shiefer. So Randy, welcome to the show. Fabulous to have you here.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Thank you so much for allowing me to come on and tell my story. Thank you.
I'm just so happy that you are coming on to share your story. So I have been waiting quite some time for some of these stories to come up to the surface, I suppose. You had a near-death experience due to COVID.
That's correct. Yes, ma'am.
And this gets me quite excited because these are really recent experiences. I've been doing this work for quite some time now, but I haven't had anything like this. And I know that this was coming. So I've kind of just been in the wings waiting for these stories. So you're the first person that I've spoken to who's had a near-death experience due to COVID. So Randy,
what an honor.
Tell us, oh, me too. Tell us what happened. I mean, I know how it began. You got sick, obviously. Share the details with us.
Yeah, sure. Back in March of 2020, my family had planned to go to Disney World, which is probably about 6 hours away from us. And COVID hit our local area, especially I live in Northwest Florida. So we had to cancel. Disney World closed, and we had to cancel those reservations. And of course, they put the travel lockdown on. So all of the family, I have 3 girls, and 2 of them live locally here. And the third one and her husband came down from Nashville, Tennessee. So we all decided just to kind of hang out at the house. And we live very close to the Gulf of Mexico and go to the beach and the jet ski and things. And so we just kind of hung around that house. And then at the end of the week, last week in March, everybody went home. And a couple of them said they didn't feel good. And I was one of them as well. I said, I'm not feeling real well. And I felt nauseous, and next morning that I woke up, my taste and smell was gone, and that was over a weekend. And I told my wife if I didn't feel better by that Monday, the 23rd, I believe it was, I was going to go to the doctor. So sure enough, by March the 23rd, I felt pretty bad. And I went down to my doctor, and he told me I had the flu. And I said, it doesn't feel like the flu. Can I get tested for this COVID? And at that time, if you remember, they had those, 5 or 6 questions that you had to answer, no, I didn't travel. I didn't, so I didn't qualify to get tested. So he said, you have the flu, go home and rest, come back if you don't feel better. By the 25th, I didn't feel better. I felt a lot worse. So I went back and I happened to see a physician assistant this time because he had the only appointment open for that day. Told me the same thing. You've got the flu, go home, rest, come back in a week if you don't feel better. I would have been dead. The next day, the 26th of March, my daughter came by to check on me. And my youngest daughter is a nurse here locally. So she called her And she said, look, Dad doesn't look good. He looks gray. So she said, get him to the emergency room right away. And they took me down to the local hospital. And my pulse oxygen level, normally it's between 95 and 100. Well, mine was down in the low 80s. They immediately took me back and put me in an isolation room and tested me for COVID. At that time, it was taking 24 hours to get test results back. So they did x-rays and I had bilateral pneumonia, pretty bad. So they admitted me and I was there 24 hours in the hospital before they had to do an emergency intubation. So they put me in a coma at that point. That would have been probably on 28th of March, put me in a coma, intubated me. And within 24 hours, I had maxed out the ventilator. So they airlifted me, care flighted me over to a larger hospital in Pensacola, Florida, where they put me on an ECMO machine. It's essentially a heart-lung bypass machine. They go in through the right jugular vein with a tube into your heart, and it removes the blood from your body, cleans it, oxygenates it, and pumps it back into your body. Goodness. So I was on that for 2 weeks. So I was in a coma for a total of 4 weeks, in the hospital for 6, 4 weeks in a coma, all that time on a ventilator and the ECMO machine. And it's during that time frame, they told my family I had a 3% chance of living. My lungs failed, bilateral pneumonia, they failed. My kidneys failed. I went on dialysis. My liver started to go. It started to throw blood clots off, and they were giving me blood thinners. And my left ventricle of my heart enlarged and wasn't pumping adequately. So they were utilizing the ECMO machine to help my heart, relax a little bit and try to get me better.
Yeah.
So I was as close to death as I could get. They told me after I got better that I was sitting on that edge and I just didn't know which way I was going to fall, and it says clearly in my medical records that they expected me to die. They, talked about my demise and, had discussed it with my family and everything. And I have a remarkable family. As I said, my one daughter is a nurse. She called a friend of hers that she went to college with, who was an infectious disease doctor. And he said, see if he can get him convalescent plasma. And long story, but they were able to get that for me. And the hospital agreed to give it to me on Good Friday of 2020, Good Friday. And by Easter morning, they were able to cap the ECMO machine. In other words, they were able to turn it off by Easter morning. And by Monday, Easter Monday, they were able to take me off dialysis. My kidneys started working again, and they started to wean me off the ventilator. You can probably hear my voice is a little raspy, and I get hoarse. That's because one of my vocal cords was damaged because I was on the ventilator for so long.
Oh, my goodness.
And that is just with me. I have to live with that. But that's a small price for having a second chance at life.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, my liver returned to normal. My heart returned to normal. My kidneys started to function again. My lungs were just completely white with COVID, completely white from top to bottom with COVID. And my respiratory therapist doctor would later tell me, he says, I have no clue how you survived and have no long-term problems. My lungs, they've tested my lungs. My lungs are 100%. Liver, kidney, heart, everything is just pretty much back to normal, actually. Actually, it's only less than 20% of people that are placed on ECMO survive. Less than 20% survive. So,
gosh, you're a fighter.
Yeah, I've become good friends with several of my ICU nurses that took care of me, because the ECMO machine requires 2 nurses 24 hours a day. Yeah. And I was on that for, like I said, almost 2 weeks. So, and in a coma. So it was in the coma where I experienced my near-death experience. And I had dreams, hallucinations, and I had this for several months after I got out of the hospital, I had these experiences. I just didn't know how to classify them. They were so vivid and so real. And I experienced things that were new to me, because I was never a really religious person of my whole growing up. And I feared death. I would actually go into panic attacks if I thought about my own death and the fact that I wouldn't be here any longer and would be gone. Not anymore. Totally changed my attitude. I have a thirst for information. I've become pretty good friends with a couple of our local priests and some of the churches around here. They're helping me through some of this and whatever I understand it better. And I still don't know what led me to read some of these near-death experience books and stuff. I don't know what led me there, but I started to look into it and research it. And then all of a sudden I started reading about it. And it was like, that's what happened to me. I saw that. I was there. I experienced that. And I was able to kind of put labels on things. And I'm blessed, not only because I'm back, but I'm also blessed that I understand most of it. And I'm able to communicate it a year after, a year and a half now, after all of this has happened to me,
Yeah.
I remember going through a long dark tunnel. And I told my daughter when I first woke up, when they brought me out of my coma, they finally allowed, Lisa is my nurse in the family. They finally allowed her to come into the room and stay with me. I was in the hospital for 6 weeks. From March the 25th, when I went into the hospital, I did not see any family member until May the 6th, when I came out of the hospital. And then they weren't allowed in to see me. I couldn't see them. Nothing.
It's such a long time.
Yeah. And so I was up there by myself, and they were constantly asking for updates and how I was doing and, et cetera, especially Lisa, the nurse. Like I said, my last week, they finally let her in to take care of me. And I started explaining some of these to her. And I remember telling her, Lisa, I think I was in something like an airplane or something. I said, but it was dark. I said, going through this tunnel, I said, I was traveling, but it didn't feel like the tube, now I call it a tunnel. The thing that I was in wasn't. But anyway, I went through it, and there was a light outside of this tunnel. I remember the feeling of this bright light. You could see the glow. And every once in a while in this tunnel, I called them airplane windows, a small little airplane window that you could see out of. These little windows that you could see out. And this magnificent light circled this tunnel, but it didn't permeate the tunnel. It didn't enter the tunnel, but you could feel its warmth. And I was so peaceful. I was at so much peace. And I remember saying to myself, you're dead. You died. And I went out and I exited the tunnel into this magnificent, beautiful hall. I was in a huge hall. Most beautiful room I've ever seen in my life. Gold walls, all gold walls with gold inlaid, what appeared to be like stained glass, huge stained glass windows, magnificent colors. They were absolutely gorgeous with huge chandeliers lining this big hall down. And I was standing on a mezzanine looking down into the hall, the floor below me. And I remember somebody was with me. I felt the presence of someone at my side. Don't know who it was, but somebody was there. I could just feel them, And we were standing at this beautiful, beautiful room. It had big arches on the side of it, big arches that led off into different areas of this hall. And they were all arched with these beautiful gold inlaid art pieces and stuff. It was magnificent. And I remember standing there, and this man approached me. He had a beard. He approached me, and I said to him, "What a gorgeous room!" And he goes, "Yes, this is one of our most popular rooms." And I said, "It's absolutely beautiful. I've never seen anything like it before." And he said, "Well, you have to leave." He says, "You don't belong here."
Oh.
And he pointed to a door. And I walked over to this door, in a big, huge, magnificent, like an oak door, two of them, outlined with big oak arches, all inlaid with designs, and absolutely beautiful. And I opened this door and I walked out into a beautiful city, magnificent city. The buildings were just so tall. You could barely see the top of them. They were so tall, and they were made of glass and gold. And I walked along, and there were parks that I would pass as I was moving along. I say walk, but I wasn't conscious of a body. I'm not conscious that I had arms and legs. It was almost as if my conscious alone was moving through this magnificent, beautiful city. And the parks were so green and manicured, and trees and flowers. It was absolutely beautiful parks. And I felt there was commotion going on around me, but I couldn't see anybody. I couldn't see them. And I kept walking and walking, and I finally got lost. And then I started to get scared because I couldn't find my way back. I said, how am I going to get back? How am I going to get back? I'm lost. I said, who's going to find me? And I remember sitting down on the gutter, or on the side, the curb. And I'm sitting there, and I was scared, and I was asking people to help me, and I couldn't understand why these people weren't stopping to help me. You know, the people that I felt this commotion around me, nobody was stopping to help. I remember looking back over my right shoulder, and this beautiful, magnificent, gorgeous white staircase rose up into the sky. And I said to myself, if I can get to that staircase and start climbing up, say maybe somebody will see me and they'll find me. So I made my way over, and I started to climb up this staircase. And as I was doing so, I heard somebody shout, there he is. There's Randy. Get him. Christy, it was almost like someone grabbed me by my shirt collar and just whisked me off of that white steps. Gone. And I went back into my dark, unconscious environment. You know, it was just black again.
Yeah.
Now, remember, I'm in a coma, so I have no idea the sequence of these events. Okay? They may have been interspaced with some of my dreams. And I know my hallucinations. I had some funny hallucinations, like the dancing panda bears on the ceiling. You know?
Oh, we might have to hear about them a bit later.
Okay. Yeah, the dancing panda bears. So I remember again, my conscious awoke, and I was just like at the end of that tunnel again. And it put me into a different part of the city. The same type of buildings, the park, but it was in a different location of that city. And I started walking around again like I did before. And it was a totally different part, but the buildings again were just magnificent and beautiful. And all of a sudden I started to get anxious and feeling, oh, I'm lost. How am I going to get back? How are they going to find me? And I said, oh, I remember those steps. I've got to find those steps. So I walked around. I finally found the steps. Same thing. Beautiful white staircase going up into the heavens. So I said, well, I'm going to go up those staircases again, see if somebody can find me. So I went back up the staircase, and the exact same thing happened. There he is. There's Randy. Get him. And I remember this time looking, and the man that grabbed me, long white hair, and I'm not sure if it was a goatee or a white beard, but he had facial hair and his long white hair and a white robe, maybe like top on. That's all I can remember seeing of him. And he grabbed me, and again, I was off. I was back into my darkened, unconscious state again, So the last one is the one that I find miraculous. And it's the one that sealed the deal for me. Because, like I said before, I was pretty much a non-believer. I wanted to believe that there was a God in heaven. But I've also been in law enforcement for over 35 years. And I was a criminal investigator. And my world dealt with evidence, dealt with proof. if I didn't have the physical evidence to be able to link someone with a crime, I had to find that piece of physical evidence. And my wife can tell you that for me to believe something, it had to be tangible. I had to find that connection. And this last NDE is because I was able to validate it. And it proved to me that there is life after death and that our conscious lives on after our body dies. Because I remember going through this tunnel again. It wasn't as long as before, but I went through this tunnel and I came out into a void, dark, but not pitch black. And again, I felt so incredibly at ease and I felt at peace. No anxiety, no nervousness, just such a wonderful feeling. And even though it was dark, I wasn't concerned, I wasn't afraid. And I said to myself, okay, you're dead. You died. And I'm looking around and said, what am I supposed to do? And the spirit comes up to me. And it was like an orb of light that came up from my side. And there was no exchange of words like we're talking today. It was just automatically, I knew that he said to me, follow me. You feel it. So we started to move through this void area. And as I got deeper, it was almost like you've been to the theater and you're looking at the stage, and all of a sudden a light comes on an actor and it illuminates the actor standing there. So as we moved in, I saw this orb of light that was off to my left-hand side. And as we got closer, all of a sudden that bright light came on, and it was my deceased mother-in-law standing there. I should say sitting there, sorry. She was sitting on a bar stool, and she had her left arm leaning on the bar. And her right side kind of faced me where I was. And she looked beautiful. Much younger, probably in her 30s, I would say. Her hair all pulled up into a bun, and she had a big white ribbon around her hair, and she was all dressed in white, this beautiful white flowing gown, and she was sitting there very regally. And I remember her looking over and looking at me, and then she would look away, and she looked away. And I tried to communicate with her, and she wouldn't acknowledge me, that I was there. She wouldn't acknowledge my presence. And I remember calling out her name. She wouldn't look at me or acknowledge me in any way. And then all of a sudden, I see this person come running behind the bar. And he was running behind the bar, young boy, maybe in his teens, and he was knocking the bottles that lined this bar. He was knocking them off the shelves. And it was my deceased brother-in-law. And wow. He was a bit of a character in life, and that's something that he would have done. But he kind of ran right by, didn't look at me, didn't acknowledge me, nothing. But I remember him running past me behind this bar, and he went around and he just disappeared into the darkness. My spirit guide, if you will, told me that we needed to move on. As I moved on into this void, her light, my mother-in-law, the light over my mother-in-law just faded off. It just faded out and she was gone. And as we moved through this void, I felt that there was something in front of me. I couldn't touch it. I couldn't see it. I couldn't feel it. But there was a barrier of some sort between me and the other side, if you will. And it moved with us. As we moved through this void area, this veil moved with me. And off on my left-hand side, off in the distance, this 3 orbs of light appeared. And I'm standing there, And I'm thinking to myself, what is that? What is that? And as we started to get closer, I recognized my deceased father, my mom, and my sister. All three have died.
Oh, wow.
And they were all standing together. And as we moved closer, I couldn't see them as well as I saw my mother-in-law. I saw my mother-in-law just as clear as I see you today. It was that clear. But I couldn't see them as clear because they were further off in the distance from me. But clearly I recognized and I felt exactly who they were. And I was closest with my father growing up, and he looked at me, but he wouldn't acknowledge me. And he turned away. And then my mother and my sister were standing there as well. And they both turned and they looked at me. And probably, you're not aware of time there. I had no sense of time. So I'm not sure, but they looked at me for more than what my father did anyway. And then they turned away and looked away from me. And I was yelling at them, Mom, Dad, my sister Gina, it's me, it's Randy. Here I am. But they would not acknowledge me. I think, because talking to a pastor of mine and my kids and things now, that they didn't want me to go through that veil. They didn't want me to come see them. They didn't want to acknowledge my presence, that I would move past that veil. And I felt that, I was almost like that uninvited dinner guest that all of a sudden shows up at the front door, and you open the front door and say, what is he doing here? Yeah. Oh. Yeah. And I think it was like, what's he doing here? It's not his time. Look, show him around a little bit and then show him the door. Okay. That's how I felt it was, because I couldn't see anybody when I was back in those cities. I felt commotion when I was back in the hall. I felt commotion. I felt others around me. I couldn't see, and they couldn't talk to me, or I couldn't hear them.
So you think that they potentially couldn't see you? It wasn't intentional.
Yes. Yeah, it wasn't intentional. I think they couldn't see me because I wasn't supposed to be there.
But there is so much to think about within that. Oh, wow.
I just happened to show up,
Yep, exactly.
And it was like, it's not your time, buddy. Hit the road. And then somebody said, all right, look, this is his third time here. Show him some stuff and let him get back to, he's not supposed to be here. So I'm standing there trying to communicate with my mom and dad, and trying to get their attention. And their light faded. It started to fade, and they started to go dark. And I remember clearly, Mom, Dad, don't go, But they faded away. And then off to my right-hand side, I saw this. It started out as an orb, like a light orb. But as they got closer, it was a young man. No idea who he was. Never saw him before in my life, if you will. And he got close, and he had very thin face, dark hair. And he came around and he stopped right in front of me. And he said, clear as I am talking to you today, Christy, clear, he said, tell Madison at the salon her grandfather's okay. And I felt in my heart, I knew I'm a veteran. I spent 20 years in the United States Air Force. In my heart, I just automatically knew that he was a veteran. I just had that feeling again. And he came back clearly. Tell Madison at the salon her grandfather's okay. And he moved over and got onto a white porch. All the banisters, the railings, the steps, the floor, all white. Just a real pretty white front porch connected to a home of some sort. And he was sitting there with another orb of light. It had a human form, but it was just an orb of light. And they started making red, white, and blue ribbons and red, white, and blue American flags. And I stood there and I watched them making these. And then all of a sudden, my spirit guide communicated, "You have to leave." And as soon as he said that, I was back into my dark, sedated world. I was gone.
Hi, Kirsty here. Just a quick note to let you know that sometimes I go live via the Kirsty Salisbury YouTube channel and the Let's Talk Near Death Facebook page. These sessions are usually on a Sunday evening about 6 p.m. Eastern Time, depending on the guest's location, the availability, and what we have in the calendar. These sessions are free for everybody to join. To get them, all you need to do is jump in and subscribe on YouTube or Facebook, and that will let you know every time that I'm going live. Once again, thanks for your support, and I look forward to connecting with you in one of our upcoming live episodes.
When I came to, when they brought me out of my coma and my daughter Lisa was there, I started to tell her these stories. And I saw grandmother. I saw both her grandmothers and her grandfather, who she never met. My father died when I was 16 years old, very quickly of a heart attack while we were on vacation.
Oh, that's a bit rough.
Yeah. And well, it's funny because, that affected me my whole life.
Oh, I don't doubt it.
Yeah, it affected me. And it took this near-death experience for me to deal with it and to understand it. And understand how his death at that time directed me in so many areas of my life. My career. My master's degree is in forensic science.
Yeah.
I did criminal investigations. I've dealt with death. I've been to more autopsies. I've investigated homicides, suicides, aggravated assault, child abuse, you name it. It was his death, I think, that led me there, because I tried to save him. I did. But I think it's so powerful that stuck with me and guided me my whole life in my career choices. I taught death investigation at college after I got out of the Air Force, So it's guided me in so many different ways. It's just now that I've started thinking about it, and I came out of ICU PTSD and ICU delirium, and very common for somebody who's been in the ICU that long. So I'm seeing a therapist, and he's been helping me deal with all of that. But it's through him that all of a sudden we started being able to put these pieces together of how strongly his death affected me and how it has guided me in so many different areas of my life. It's really remarkable. So I told my daughter, Lisa, about this man that approached me. And she says, "Dad, who was he?" I said, "I have absolutely no idea who it was." I said, "All I know about him is he's a veteran." And she goes, "And who's Madison?" I said, "I have no clue. I don't know a Madison." And the word salon is not one that I use. I use barbershop. I use hairdresser when my wife goes to the hairdresser. Salon is not a word that I use. She goes, "Salon, Dad, what salon?" I said, "Lisa, I don't use the word salon, so I have absolutely no idea." "Well, how are you going to find them?" I said, "I don't know, but I feel I have a responsibility to pass along the message to some person out there, who would like to hear from her grandfather that her grandfather is okay." So I had to learn to walk again, and I had to learn to swallow again. So I had some at-home rehabilitation. And so I was in a wheelchair for a while and then to a walker. And I came out, wheeled myself out of the room one day, and I happened to be looking in my dresser for something else. I was looking for something completely different. And I came across a business card that I had picked up. I have no clue when I picked it up, and I have no idea how long it's been sitting in my dresser. But it was for a barbershop locally here in town. So I came out and I said, "Lisa," I said, "could you call them?" Because my voice was worse than it is right now. I mean, I could barely talk. I said, "Could you call them and find out what they're doing for haircuts? I've been in the hospital for 6 weeks. I've been home for 2. It's like 8 weeks. I said, I'd like to go down and get a trim. So I went back into my room, and she comes back and she goes, Dad, where'd you get this card? I said, it was in my dresser. She goes, no. Where did you get the card? I said, I must have picked it up at the barbershop. I said, what's the name on the barbershop? And she said it. I said, well, that's probably where I got it. She goes, have you ever looked at this card? And I said, Lisa, enough. What are you getting at? She goes, I think we found your Madison.
I knew you were going to say that.
She says, what are you talking about? So she showed me the card, and on the card, it was Madison Logan written on the card.
Oh,
so she called down. Yes, the barbershop, the salon had a Madison. So I said, make an appointment with Madison. I have to talk to her. So we did. A couple of days went by, and Lisa went with me because I couldn't drive. I wasn't driving at the time. My wife, she said, no, Lisa, you taking. So went down, and Lisa, we were sitting inside. Everybody else had to stand outside, but I was there in my walker. And the manager came out, and they said, you can come in. She didn't have a seat. Don't be standing outside. So Lisa and I went inside, and we were the only ones sitting there. And I said, who do you think is Madison? And she said, Dad, I have no clue. And I had recognized all of the men and the ladies inside the barbershop. I mean, you know what I mean? I didn't know them, but I recognized them. I've seen them before.
Yeah.
So this one young girl walks up, dark hair, probably in her 20s, calls my name. And I said, hi. She goes, hi, I'm Madison, and how do you want your hair cut? And so she starts cutting my hair. And my daughter told her my experience, that I had COVID, was in the hospital, so sick, I almost died. And I said, Madison, do you mind if I ask you a couple of questions? And she goes, no, go ahead. I said, they're personal questions. She goes, that's okay. And I said, are both of your grandfathers still living? And she goes, no. She said, the one grandfather that I was the closest with passed away less than a year ago. She said, now this is in May of 2020. She says, next month, which would have been June, she said, will be 1 year since he has died. And I said, did he live here locally? And she goes, oh, no. She goes, my whole family is from Iowa, which is about 1,200 miles to the north of me. And she said, I'm the only one that lives here in Florida. And she says, my whole family lives in Iowa. And I said, was he a veteran? And she goes, oh, yeah, he was a veteran. She says, I think it was Vietnam. He served in Vietnam. She goes, I know he was in the Army because he always talked about the Army. And I said, well, Madison, I think your grandfather, I said, I don't know if you're going to believe this or not. I said, but I think your grandfather approached me and he has a message for you. And she steps back. And I said, Madison, this is exactly what he told me. Tell Madison at the salon her grandfather's okay. He wants you to know that he is okay. She's crying. I'm crying. Lisa's crying. Everybody else in the barbershop is looking at us like we're nuts. Don't go to that girl. She'll make you cry, After a few seconds, we kind of got our composure there. I said, Madison, your grandfather came up to me, and this is what he said. He moved on to a white porch. Is that significant to you somehow? And she goes, that would have been his house in Iowa. She said it had a white porch that he loved to sit on after he retired. Every day he sat on that white porch, and he would talk to the people and just watch life go by. His house in Iowa. He loved sitting there. And I said, he was sitting there and he started to make red, white, and blue ribbons and American flags. I said, is that somehow significant to your family? Christy, she stepped back from me and her eyes got as big as saucers. And she said, he belonged to the local American Legion. And every Veterans Day, the whole family would support him and go down to the American Legion. And guess what they made? red, white, and blue ribbons, and American flags for the veterans' graves.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Yeah. And I didn't know this family. I did not know Madison. I didn't know her grandfather, John. I didn't know him. I didn't know her. I didn't know her family. And as an old criminal investigator, that's evidence.
That's evidence for sure.
That's evidence.
Wow. Randy, you've blown my mind with all of this. The whole way through, you have had very distinct details. So it was the 26th of March. Your oxygen level was 81%. You had a 3% chance to live. The whole way through, your description of what happened has been very evidence-based. So I'm blown away. Wow.
Yeah. And I had a chance. Madison and I are good friends now.
Oh, good.
Love her to death. She's my girl. She's like a fourth daughter to me,
Oh, lovely.
And now her husband, at the time, her fiance, I had to go get physical therapy because my shoulders locked up, and he put me in physical therapy. And I come back one day and get my hair cut. And Madison's house. She says, "How are you doing?" I said, "Oh, good." I said, "They have me at physical therapy." She goes, "Oh, where are you going?" I said, "Oh, up here at Andrews Institute." And she goes, "Who's your therapist?" And I said, "A very, very nice young man. His name is Josh." She goes, "Randy, that's my Josh." She says, "That's my fiance."
Oh, small world. Isn't
and I
that
said,
funny?
"You're kidding me."
Yeah.
And my kids kept telling me, "Dad, you're being pulled to this family for some reason. You're being pulled to them." We all know each other. We're all good friends. We had lunch a few times and dinner. And I've talked to Kathy, Grandma. I've talked to her. And I told her, and she sent me a picture of John. And when she sent me that picture, I called her up and I said, "Kathy, this is who I saw."
Mm-hmm.
And she sent me a picture when he was 20 years old in Vietnam. He was in his uniform, thin hair, thin face, dark hair. And I told her, I said, "Kathy, I'm almost positive this is who I saw."
Oh, wow.
And she goes, "Randy, this is the second time that he's tried to contact me."
Oh, is it? Oh,
yeah.
Tell us about that.
I said, "Kath, what's?" She said, "This is the second time." And I said, "Well, what happened before?" She said, "It was probably about 6 months after he died." And he said, "I found a business card. I dialed the number on the business card." And she said, but mistakenly and unknowing to her, she dialed a wrong area code. And a gentleman answers, and she said, "Are you with such and such insurance company?" He goes, "No, ma'am, you must have the wrong number." She goes, "Or are you this person?" Gave him the name. He goes, "No, ma'am, I'm not that person. I don't work for that insurance company." She goes, "I'm sorry to bother you." She said, "My husband passed away and I'm trying to contact this insurance company." She said, "I'm calling from Iowa." She said, "Where did I call?" And he goes, "Oh, man, you called California." And she goes, "Oh." She says, "Well, I'm calling this." She says, "My name's Kathy." And she says, "I'm calling from Iowa." And he goes, "Wait a second. Your name is Kathy?" And she goes, "Yeah." "And you're calling from Iowa?" And she goes, "Yes." She says, "Kathy from Iowa, let me tell you a story." He said, 3 months ago, he goes, "I was in a very bad motorcycle accident. And the paramedics told me when they pulled me off the asphalt, I was dead." He said, "But all I could hear was a voice screaming at me, 'Tell Kathy in Iowa, John is okay.'" And he repeated it and repeated it and repeated it. "Tell Kathy in Iowa, John is okay." And he goes, "When I heard that, and afterwards I said, I don't know anybody in Iowa. I've never been to Iowa, and I don't know Kathy in Iowa." And he goes, "Until you called me." Yeah. So John is he's a pesky guy. He wants to get that message through. But what I find that I'm still trying to wrap my head around, Christy, is how did he know that I had even a remote connection to his granddaughter?
I know. I know.
How did he even know that? How did he know that I would survive and would be able to find his granddaughter and give that message to her. How did he know that? And how did he choose me?
How did he know Kathy was going to phone the wrong number?
Yeah, and the guy out there. How?
I know, it blows my mind. Every day I'm confronted by these questions. How does it all work? I do not know. If anyone's listening to this and they have some insight, fill us in, because there's so many possibilities. There's so many answers, and it really is infinite how we could pull together the conclusions. And I come to the conclusion that we actually can't consign it down to one answer. There's too many elements at stake. There's too many things in play.
I agree.
Totally. Yeah. And the question that I'm thinking as you're sharing this amazing story is, why was it so important? Did you ever find that out through Kathy or through medicine? Why did they need to know that he was okay?
Because he died very suddenly, just like my father. He died of a heart attack in the back bedroom of the house with the white porch. And Kathy had taken her grandson to an appointment. And she yelled to him. She goes, "John, we're leaving." And he goes, "Okay, see you later." And she says, she told me she was not 10 minutes down the road when her granddaughter, who was at the house with John, called. And she goes, Grandpa dropped over and he won't wake up. I don't know what to do. And she goes, "Call 911. And she dropped the phone and called 911. And by the time Kathy turned around and got there, he was gone.
It just seems so unfair, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So unfair. Wow.
But to connect to me, the connection is there, just like my father, because we were on vacation in a motel room. And my mom started to scream at 4:00 in the morning. Randy, help, your dad's choking, And I remember I'm 16 years old. And I remember waking up and her in just a tremendous panic, and I rushed over to my dad and I remember pulling him off the bed. And ironically, before we went on that vacation, I had spent a couple of weeks with my cousin, who was a volunteer fireman at the time, back in the 60s. And he had a first aid book there. And guess what chapter I started to read? On CPR. So I started to perform that on him, not knowing what I was doing.
Yeah.
No clue what I was doing, in a state of panic. And he went very quickly, just like John.
Yeah.
So John must have known that, that he shared that with my family, my father.
Oh, there's too many synchronicities, isn't there? There's too much going on for it to be by chance. Well, that's how I feel.
Oh yeah. No.
I want to go back a little bit, Randy. I want to go back into your near-death experience, because you've basically had 3 of them there, if I've understood correctly.
Yeah. There's one more that I'm trying to work out.
Okay, one more. Is that something that you want to share with us today? You're still trying to process that, and maybe we can share that later? Or
well, maybe you can help me out, because I'm still trying to figure it out.
Oh my goodness. We can give it a good go. That's the thing. I mean, it's only been a year. I was trying to do the maths as you're talking. I was thinking it's only been a year since you came back home after being in hospital for those 6 weeks. It's such a short amount of time to process all of this.
Yeah.
So when you first woke up out of your coma, regardless of the physical state that you're in, because I can imagine that physically your body is traumatized. Like you said, your voice box, your vocal cords, everything has been damaged. Your lungs, you've got all sorts of things going on.
Yeah.
Aside from the physical, what was going through your mind? Like, what was happening emotionally or within your mental capacity or spiritually, I suppose? What was going on within you?
I can remember bits and pieces, tiny little bits and pieces of being in the coma. One of my favorite nurses, one of my angels at the time, she wore a big, heavy black mask, and she had her hair always pulled up in a bun. And I thought for a while it was my daughter, Lisa, that was taking care of me, because she wears her hair when she's on duty. As a nurse, she wears her hair the same way. And she's a labor and delivery nurse, so she's not an ICU nurse. But so I thought it was Lisa, and the girl has told me a couple of times that I called her Lisa. Excuse me. Once I got the tube taken out of my voice and everything. But I can remember seeing her, and I can remember laying there screaming at the top of my lungs for help, for someone to help me, And I can remember they had to restrain me, and they eventually paralyzed me. They gave me the drugs to paralyze me because I was so anxious and trying to get these tubes out. So they put these white gloves on my hands, and they tied my hands down. And I can remember looking down and just pulling. I pulled so hard I actually tore a tendon in my wrist. They had to repair it.
Oh, that's really hard.
Yeah. I was pulling on these restraints so hard to try to break out of them. And I was screaming at the top of my lungs. And it was all in my head. It was all in my head because I had tubes down my throat and in my neck. I keep telling people, I don't know how polite it is. I said, if I had an orifice, I had a tube in it. And when they ran out of orifices, they created them.
Yeah. Oh, man. What a journey.
But, yeah. Some of the early things that I remember coming out of that coma is my angel rubbing my sternum, real hard. And she was, wake up, Mr. Randy, wake up, wake up. And I remember just, leave me alone. What are you doing? And then she started firing the question to see how cognizant I was. Who's the president? What day of the week it was? What month it was? And it was like, I can't remember all. Just leave me alone. I can't. And I just wanted her to leave me alone. And all of a sudden I remember saying, look, I got to remember some of these answers. So she'll quit rubbing my sternum so hard, And I remember coming around, and they actually FaceTimed my family with me when I was starting to come out of the coma. Right. And one of the first things I said was, how's my family? Is my family okay?
Yeah.
And I went through their names. My wife, is Donna okay? My daughter, Lisa, Kate, Aaron, are they okay? I went through the whole family to be sure that everybody else was safe. And they were. They said, no, everybody. I said, I told them, Mallory, my angel said that, look, I died. I need to know, is everybody okay? Or is everybody living? And she says, you didn't die, And I said, I died. Is everybody okay? And that was something that I didn't remember saying, but she tells me that I said it. I said it to her and asked her. But see, I've never been a real religious person. I went through the motions, and that's all. I was almost envied others that were so religious and understood the Bible and understood. And my kids went to Catholic school. My wife was baptized Catholic as a child. She went to Catholic school. So that faith, of which I didn't have any at the time, I lacked. And so it wasn't.
Where do you stand with that now? Can you say that you've spent some time with some local pastors, that you've been searching some new avenues?
Oh, yeah, much more spiritual now. Yes, because I have my evidence, don't I?
Well, of course. Yes.
I know I have my evidence. Before, I was skeptic. It was like, how do they know that there's life after death?
Yeah.
They talk about it, but how do they know?
And you said very early on in our conversation that you know for sure now that there's life after death.
Yeah, John came to me. I didn't know who John was. He found me. He told me. So I know, and I saw my relatives. Even if I strongly believe those first two, when I was in that hall, the beautiful hall, and in that city, I truly believe those were some sort of NDEs, near-death experiences. I just believe it because I felt a commotion. I didn't see anything. I felt people next to me, but I couldn't see them. So I think those are all very spiritual. They were there with me, but I wasn't allowed to see them because I wasn't supposed to be there. But then, like I said, what really sold me on that is when John came to me and said, tell Madison I'm okay.
Yeah, that's amazing.
That was so convincing to me that there is an afterlife.
Yeah,
you know.
I love it. When you were going the white stairways and you were saying that you were going part of the way up and then you were getting pulled by the collar and you were taken back, what do you think the stairways were? I've got a couple of ideas in my head. Where did they lead to?
Oh, they just went up as far as you could see. As far as you could see, they reached.
Do you think they had an end?
It didn't look like it. They just went up as far as I could see.
What do you think would have happened if you had been able to progress further and further up those stairs?
I probably would not be sitting here having this conversation.
Yeah, I was wondering whether they were actually the exit point of where you were.
Yeah.
We will never know, will we? So
I think I was given that choice a couple of different times. One is the steps, those stairs. If I wouldn't have been found, and something I'm looking at is, it's so remarkable to me because I wasn't religious, I wasn't spiritual, I just went through the motions, but I was found. You know,
right.
They found me. And now my whole attitude towards spirituality, reading the Bible, I wouldn't even discuss the Bible with my daughters.
Wow.
You know, because I didn't know, I never read it. I didn't know anything about it. Never said prayers. They would say a prayer at dinner, one that they had learned in Catholic school or something, you know, they always did it. And I just went through the motions. But they found I was found. No, I was found on those steps.
Yeah.
You know, and now my kids, I often think COVID was terrible. I mean, COVID is a terrible, terrible disease. It took millions and millions of lives. It's horrific. I understand all of that. But it was a blessing for me. It was a blessing because we've always been a close family. My girls and my wife and I, we've always been a very close family. But I feel in my heart that we have connected deeper after this experience than even what we were before. You know?
Absolutely. I always believe that there's a gift within crisis, and it's very hard to get to the point where we can see that. That can take years and years and years, but there's always something positive that can come out of our crisis moments.
I'm 68 years old, be 69 next month, I think anyway, is that I had this and God said, look, this guy didn't have 30 years to figure it out. So we got to help him out of here a little bit. And he guided me. He's guiding me in these directions. And when I talked to an NDEer the other day, and he's an author, and he sent me his books, and I'm reading his books now. And I've just connected with so many different people that never in my life I'd ever, yourself included, that I would ever connect with. And it's just a blessing.
It is a blessing. And that's one of the beautiful things that can come out of these harder times. I want to go back to the stairwell.
Yes,
you said the man who caught you, pulled you by the collar, he had whitish hair. He had
long
facial hair.
Yeah, he had a goatee. And I remember distinctly the mustache and the goatee. That stood out to me. And I struggle with what, if he had a full beard or just that mustache and goatee. I struggle with that. But something in me just said he had a full white beard and this white robe.
Yeah. So this is often a typical, I guess, way that people would perceive Jesus or another religious figures. Do you think that do you know who this was? Do you think it could have been Jesus?
I wish with all my heart that I would have felt who this person was. I really do.
Yeah.
I'm blessed beyond means, but that would have been like the blessing, you know?
Yeah.
And so many people have life reviews and they talk to Jesus. And I don't think I was allowed to go that far. Yeah. You know, that veil there kept me from going deeper and experiencing all that others have.
Yeah.
You know, there's no doubt in my mind that what they have experienced is real. You know, I just wasn't allowed to go that deep into the realm that I was in. You know?
Exactly. Yeah. I find your experiences so interesting because I haven't come across the feeling like there's people around you, yet you can't see them. And then you were talking about your family members saying they weren't acknowledging you. I think you may have even said that somebody turned their back slightly on you.
Yeah, all three of them turned around and looked the other way. My dad turned around.
Did that hurt you in some kind of way? Did you feel offended? Yes. Or
not offended? I couldn't understand at the time why.
Right.
I couldn't understand why they weren't acknowledging me. I was yelling to them, but I think that veil stopped them from maybe hearing me. They didn't try to communicate with me. Neither did my mother-in-law. She did not try to communicate with me. They all
so
looked
quite
at
possibly
me.
They couldn't have seen you.
Possibly.
We will never know.
We won't know. I did go down. My sister and my mother are buried together. And a few months ago, my wife and I went down, and I did have some few choice words with them. I said, I traveled all the way up there to see you guys, and you shouldn't even say hello.
Didn't even acknowledge me.
Didn't even acknowledge me. What is up with that? You know?
That's funny. That's funny. I sense a lot of your personality coming through, because even as you're sharing your story, you're sharing it with you and thinking, man, I'm in this room and it's beautiful and all the gold. And there was this person, I was saying to them, what a beautiful room. And I was thinking, oh, Randy, you were so in the moment. I suspect that's probably how you are today in lifetime as well, as just quite a bubbly, chatty, just processing what's around you. And that humoured me. I love that.
Yeah.
Within the city that you were in, when you were saying it's hustling and bustling, there were parks, but you couldn't see anybody.
Mm-hmm.
You're saying that you felt like there was pain, you were frustrated, how am I going to get back? There was negative emotion.
Yes.
In what had been the most beautiful place. Was it like the beauty faded as you went further into the city?
You know, that is a very interesting question. The beauty faded, because I didn't think about that before.
We often talk about heavenly places.
I'm sorry?
We hear about heavenly places and how there's just love. There's no pain, there's no illness, there's no sadness, there's nothing. It's just pure bliss and beauty. And so you were in an experience like that, and then you were in an experience where it became, I guess, it had a lot of fear in it. You were concerned. It wasn't that beautiful experience anymore.
That's an interesting question, because I remember sitting there on that curb, and it was gray around me. It was all gray. Now that you had mentioned that, and that came to light, it was all gray when I was sitting on that curb. So that would kind of correspond with what you had saying, that I went into an area that wasn't as beautiful.
Was it the same thing? Yeah, I'm having trouble to actually ask the questions because I'm not quite sure.
Yeah, because I remember walking and started to get concerned that I was lost. And that brilliant light and that warmth and that loving feeling that I had when I exited those doors and was walking through that city. And then I started to get scared and worrisome that I wouldn't be able to find my way back. And how do I get back to that hall that I saw? I needed to get back there. And when I sat down, I felt very tired, very worried, played out, exhausted. And I remember things around me hazy. They weren't as clear as what it was before, except when that white staircase appeared. And that white staircase was as clear as anything going up into the sky.
It's amazing. What do you think would have happened if you'd carried walking further into that city, away from the room with the oak doors?
I don't know. I don't know what would have happened if I would have continued on, because I think I had to climb those stairs either to keep going and pass into the next realm, the next level, maybe. But I was pulled off. So I don't know. I don't know what would have happened. I mean, because I was walking, I remember there was no cars, there was the roads, the pavement. It wasn't a black asphalt type of a street. They were very bright. Like when you hold, take a very thin sliver of a pearl or something and hold light behind it. It was like that, the roads in through this city. So I never broke that down into those sections like you had suggested. what happened if I walked through, or when I sat down on that curb. Things changed when I sat down on that curb, now that I think about it.
It's interesting because I've got a very visual imagination. So as you're sharing your story, I'm visually seeing it. Yeah. And when you talked about the playgrounds, I assumed there would be children playing on the playgrounds. So then I'm thinking, are they spirit children? What are they? But by the sounds of it, you couldn't see anybody. It was just you. You could feel them, but you couldn't see them.
No, I could not see them.
So, I mean,
to me, I was alone.
Yeah. And to me,
vision. And I just was alone in walking through this city.
Yeah.
One of our pastors said, well, that could be because I wasn't very religious. I didn't have the faith, and it wasn't spiritual. It's like I walk alone. I was walking alone by myself, I don't think others could see me because I was, help, I'm lost, help me. But nobody did. And I couldn't understand why others weren't helping me. Why isn't somebody helping me, finding me? I couldn't figure that out.
Definitely. That sounds quite terrifying, I think. So, yeah.
I remember being very scared, very anxious when those steps appeared. And I think when I did that, that was keep going and you're going to pass away. But I wasn't allowed to because I was pulled off those steps.
Yeah. How does that make you feel about your life today? Like the fact that you're back, and does that give you a sense of purpose, or what do you question why you came back?
I question every day why me.
Yeah.
Why
I relate to that.
Yeah. And I told my wife, I said, why me? I wasn't spiritual. I wasn't a very strong religious person. Why did he save me when there's so many other people that are so deeply religious that he could have saved? But he saved me, chose to save me. Why? What have I done in my life to deserve a second chance like that, to come back? So I think part of it was he brought me back to give me my evidence and then pass on my message of what I experienced and what I saw and what I felt, and that there is life after death, and I'm just not saying it because John came to me and gave me a message to a young lady I didn't even know.
Mind blowing.
And I'm not sure how often that happens. All the books that I've read and the people I've talked to, yes, messages are sent back, but normally the messages that are sent back could be for a relative, or somebody that they know.
Yeah, someone you know.
This is a complete stranger.
Yeah.
Complete stranger. But my daughter, Erin, my oldest, is into our genealogy. So she even took their name to see if there is a remote connection somewhere with this other family, with our family.
Oh, wow.
Just to see if somewhere back centuries ago we may have even, but she didn't come up with anything. There's no connection even in genealogical past that we could be connected.
Amazing. I guess it's one of those things we will never, ever know.
No.
Yeah. We don't know why these things happen.
Not until I can get up there and talk to John.
Yeah. And keep climbing that staircase. Yeah.
Yeah.
Randy,
when I get up there, there's a few people I'm going to look up.
Definitely. Randy, I've so enjoyed chatting with you today. Thank you for sharing. You've got 3 experiences there that you've shared. I'd love to get you back when you've worked on the 4th one a little bit.
Okay.
I'd love to just continue the conversation for a few more minutes over with our VIP area, with our VIPs there.
Yeah, thank you.
But thank you once again, Randy. This has been amazing, and I trust that you're well now. Are you well now?
I am now. They tested my heart, done all kind of tests of my lungs, my kidneys. I mean, they've put dye stain in, and they did all the MRIs and CAT scans and did everything up in my brain. And the doctors just shake their heads and say, "We don't understand it." And my respiratory therapist doctor said, "People are leaving that only went half of what I experienced are leaving on ventilator. They're leaving on oxygen. That their lungs are so badly scarred."
Yeah.
And he said, "I don't understand how you came out of this." He goes, "I'm happy. My respiratory therapist now, I won't say good friends, but we're acquaintances, and he just shakes his head and just said, I don't understand how you came out unscathed. And as I do, I had a few connections.
Yeah, still do by the sounds of it. Oh, it is fabulous. Randy Schiefer, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. It's been a real honor. Thank you so much.
Thanks for joining me for another episode of the Let's Talk Near Death podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to stay updated with all of the events we have going on, and to visit www.letstalkneardeath.com to join the VIP community.